I'm only gonna say it once, I promise. We're transitioning yet again to another news story along the Olympic-Wallowa Linement, or OWL. As we're entering eastern Washington, this is where we start to see some really solid evidence, such as the Yakima Fold Belts, which all kind of go in the same direction. And of course, with eastern Washington, we have some new threats, if you will, along with this story. Aha, surprise, it's radiation. Just kidding. There is so much going on, though, over on this side of the mountain that I have to break it up into at least 3 separate videos. In this one, I'm going to lay the sort of foundation. One of the first things we talked about was how Washington isn't really built from stuff that was made around here. It's built from exotic terrains, which extend from the Idaho border to the Pacific Ocean. The oldest part of Washington, typically found over in Spokane, is a part of the North American craton. Craton is basically the oldest parts of continents that have been stable for quite some time. We're talking a billion with a B. Over the years, a large array of these exotic terrains, similar to the Olympics and Silencia, have been smushed up against the coast of Washington and Canada and Oregon over a long period of time. But the two main players here, the intermontane superterrane and the insular superterrane, are kind of the big one. But it's not like these whole bodies are just one giant long mash of rocks that uppercut at us. They're generally made of more small-scale terrains that kind of came in at all at the same time and maybe had formation roughly in the same area or linked up out in the ocean and then were slammed into our coast. And by coming in, I'm talking in the sense that the intermontane superterrane came in roughly 190 to 170 million years ago, and the insular superterrane came in roughly 120 to 100 million years ago. You may notice, though, on the present geologic map of Washington that these kind of stop right about where the Columbia River is today. Spoiler for the next video, big eruption. While a little younger than our present story, this gives us an idea of what Washington roughly would have looked like. Knowing that we have these large mountains coming in, we can make a fairly reasonable guess that they were depositing massive amounts of material off of them, just like rivers do today. But again, we're missing a big chunk of that story under a unit that looks fairly contiguous across the entirety of eastern Washington. Well, we've got some hints at what's down there. With some hints of sandstone near Ellensburg and Wenatchee, miners and prospectors back in the day thought to themselves, hey, where there's sandstone, there's usually coal, and where there's usually coal, there's oil and natural gas. And surprise, surprise, there was prospecting for oil and natural gas here in Washington. Ironically, it was what I was working on before the owl story. But that contiguous layer of rock from the Columbia River south is very thick. We're talking in the magnitude of 6,000 feet plus. So drill down through 6,000 plus feet of rock, and what do we see? A good place to start, the deepest well here in Washington state, right on Saddle Mountain at 17,518 feet down. And we have the well logs that show us what's down there, such as there's 3,000 feet of basaltic rock, and right around there, we transition to sandstone. So what this tells us is that there was a massive environment of dense forests and sandy material that reminds us kind of over here in what we see in the Green River Gorge of western Washington. It was hot, it was humid, the dinosaurs lived there. I kind of compare it to Florida without the whole being Florida part. And you want to see what was at the bottom of this well? Just to really hit home how deep we are here, 14,900 plus feet deep. We transition again from the sandstone story to that granite story. And a lot of those exotic terrains are made up of volcanic rock, granite being one of them. Side note, you know they've found something though when they start punching holes in the ground almost like... It just boggles my mind that we can actually see what's down below this giant massive rock. So we've established that the basement of eastern Washington is, exotic terrains with sandstone resting on top of it, and then our cap rock on top of that. Want to point out, timeline speaking, again, this is before the Cascades, all of the earthquake faults that we've talked about so far, and the Silencia part of the story as well. So we've got our basement layer. What's the next part of the story? A mortal enemy appears, and whether I like it or not, we've got to talk about Yellowstone. In the next video, we get to talk about the Columbia River flood basalt. One last thing, there's going to be a slight bit of a pause in the owl videos after the next video, which is coming on Saturday, as we are going to head out to the Pacific Ocean to find oil at Ruby Beach.